forecasting. So those of you out there that are buyers of barley, if your crops only barley is coming from the Western Cape, you're going to need to find a new supplier and a new loading port, because the Western Cape produces 74% of all barley coming out of South Africa. As the furthest south, it's going to be affected the most. It's going to be in the heavy UVB damage zone. And also, if you see the black box above the crop calendar, it's right in the middle of the maturation in the mid-season, which you can refer back to the charts, which would reduce crop yields. Again, thank you for spending the time right here on TV and the Adapt 2030 show. David Dubine, your host. Today, I wanted to talk about the future. We can almost see where society is going to bend to. Now, if you understand the content of today's program, you'll understand why an enormous amount of things are moving the way they are, the direction that they are in our society that we see right now, with more control, seemingly absurd things happening in government, elected officials, non-elected officials across the EU. So just in a very short summary, the water vapor pushed up into the atmosphere in the Hunga Tonga eruption added 10% of water vapor to the atmosphere in a single event in a day. So the amount of water in the atmosphere increased 10% in one day. Now, an enormous amount of that went way high up into the atmosphere, into this cloud layer or layer of the atmosphere above the clouds called the mesosphere. And there, the ice crystal surfaces, they have chemical interaction that break down ozone. So we're going to get into a runaway ozone event here coming up August, September, October, November of this year. And there's going to be a huge amount of UVB, which will cause crop damage across the Southern Hemisphere. Now, that's in addition to what they're dealing with absurd cooler temperatures, ridiculous amounts of rain, almost a year's worth of rain in single events now. So there's going to be a catastrophic series of events across the Southern Hemisphere. Now, for us up here, we're going to start to come into something called a year without a summer, which I'll go over and show you some areas in Europe. But when governments around the world look at this, they're going to see the same thing I see. There's going to be way less food available, not only for us to eat, but for the animals to consume, and animal feed, and also for the ethanol production, feedstocks, these types of things. So across the board, everything's going to get more expensive, from the egg to the poultry to the chicken, the meat, the beef, the cow, the pork, everything, and then the foods we eat that are processed in factories. So I'm going to run through it with you. Hold on, take a deep breath, because share with your friends and family. You're going to be looking for these clouds right here that I have on the front screen. These are called mesospheric or polar stratospheric clouds. Depends on which layer in the atmosphere they occur. A little bit higher up is the mesosphere ice crystal clouds, and below is the polar stratospheric clouds. Now, this takes extreme cold temperatures to form, and you have to have water vapor in the atmosphere, which we have an abundance of now. So now we're looking for the extreme cold to onset this and see which season it's supposed to be onsetting. Well, what we're seeing in the Northern Hemisphere right now is the wrong season for the onset. So the reason I talk about this is left side is what we're seeing right now out of season in both hemispheres. It's the wrong time for these clouds to be anywhere at the moment, because we're in the turnover from the end of the winter coming into spring, and the Southern Hemisphere is warm in summer. They shouldn't have these stratospheric clouds until the depths of winter. I mean, the coldest weeks of the winter generally will spur these clouds. What do you see on the right there? That is the year 1816, year without a summer, paintings from Europe. You'll find huge amount of research done on cloud variability and cloud colors and different things after the eruptions. Tons of peer-reviewed research done on this. A lot of work on masterpieces reflecting clouds differences after huge volcanic eruptions, whether it be Mount Laki in the 1700s, Tambora, which this references here, 1816, year without a summer. But we see it through history, and now we're seeing an overlap coming back here. So I'm going to get a little science-y on you. This is off Copernicus. Anybody can find this. BlackRock warns, prepare for a recession unlike any other. History has proven the only way the Fed can fight inflation is with a recession. 80% of the retirees are concerned about inflation and very concerned about the stock market. We're heading toward a recession, and investors need to buy gold. Patriot Gold Group is introducing the 2023 Recession Protection No Fee for Life IRA. Call the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Patriot Gold Group has a No Fee for Life IRA where your 401k or IRA can be in physical gold or silver on qualifying rollovers. 546-7020 to get your free investor guide today. And now on with the video. It's actually on their front page right now, which is surprising how they're putting it up in front so you can find the ozone hole discovery so easily. It's almost like they're dropping in your lap. As you just click on the site, it's right there. Usually you have to dig way deep to find this, but I'm surprised it's just right there in their front articles. So the ozone hole development, this is in Dobson units. So the higher it is, like the 400 where you see red at the higher elevations of the atmosphere, that's a good thing. The higher, the more it is, the better. So red is good, blue is bad. Nothing is zero. So this is what you would be looking at through the atmosphere into the Southern Hemisphere. That's Antarctica that you see, that continent there. And at the apex, this is the highest depletion of the entire year, and it goes through the cycle. The ozone hole increases in size to, what we see here at the apex, and this was in October. So we only get 4 months of this ozone hole currently in the Southern Hemisphere. Now, it was supposed to be healing itself, and they were so proud that, the CFCs were done with and the ozone hole's healing and covering. There's a few anomalies happening. First of all, down at that southwest quadrant there, that should not be there. That's a complete column reversal. It should be filled in there. There should be ozone in that layering, but an entire part of the column has disappeared, which is unusual to say the least. And then when it did start to, reform itself and the temperatures got warmer, all the ozone started to fill back in. There's still an anomaly off to the west there, if you're looking at the map to the left. That is over toward Africa, and it's off center of even being over the South Pole. So there's huge anomalies that they've noticed already that are happening because of the extra water vapor in the atmosphere and the breakdown of ozone that this is allowing at the higher reaches of the atmosphere. So just to put it in a chart, in a single day, they increased the amount of water vapor in our atmosphere 10%. So then you have to start to think, well, this would explain a lot of these major floods that we're seeing, a lot of these year of rain in a single event, 6 months worth of rain. New Zealand just, I'll show you some charts from New Zealand. It's really astounding off the hook here. But purple means more water vapor in the atmosphere. And as you can see, the Tonga eruption was east of Australia, and that seems to be concentrating and still hanging in that generalized area. But if you do look at the amount of extra water vapor, purple and light purple is the extra amount of water vapor that's circulating in our atmosphere now. And this is one of the best charts I've seen to show it to you literally in black and white. Well, purple and light purple, but that is the extra amount of water that we're seeing circulate. So the next question would be, where did it circulate to since the eruption in January of 2022? Now, it's been a full year, and it literally just a full year plus a couple weeks. So the amount of cooling, we still have another 2 months to go before we hit the bottom of the cooling, two and a half months. And we will stay there for another full year plus 13, 14 months, so around that. And then it'll start to warm back up. But we're looking well into 2024 before anything stabilizes in the Southern Hemisphere. So this is off of SAGE. It's another satellite set like Copernicus was, and you get Terra Modis, and there's a whole bunch of different satellites if you want to get up in there. Take a look. Himawari is another one. Japan Meteorological Association takes care of that one and maintains it. But what we're looking at here on the left side is the arrows. I included those to show you where this water vapor has gone in our atmosphere. That zero mark that you're seeing in the center is the equator. Bottom of the chart is this, the southern part of the hemisphere, and that arrow points to somewhere well up to around 50 degrees south, where there's huge density of water vapor blocking. The lighter it is and the darker orange and the brighter the yellow, the more aerosols are blocking sunlight. And then if you look on the left at the top there, it says 60 degrees north and above. So the same sunlight blocking polar stratospheric cloud, mesospheric cloud building is well into our 70 degrees north latitude, which is very close to the North Pole. So what we're looking at is the water vapor has circulated completely around the planet to encompass both hemispheres all the way to the polar regions. Now, if we jump over to the right side of the chart, same the lighter yellow it is, or going to the hot white, the more density in the atmosphere blocking particulates. And we'll see, I put the two white lines there. So you can see the band of the heaviest is probably around 40 south up to 25 north. Anything that's a crop grow zone in that area is heavily affected, heavily affected. So that straddles the equatorial bands, and that would explain the record range across Indonesia, the record range across Democratic People's Republic of Congo, and that whole area in Africa as well. Seeing massive floods. What's that? Guyana is like 7x the normal rainfall. And it's all about the temperature too. So now we start to get about 3 different variables that we need to overlay to get a forecast moving out. So I'll direct your attention to the bottom of the chart here. This is over Antarctica, and you can look at the temperature difference, 14 degrees Celsius cooler than normal in measurable atmospheric layers. Where they at? 30 millibar, 10 millibar, 850 millibar, wherever you're looking, cooler than normal temperatures. So this is a definite runaway cascade cool, along with ozone depletion event that will scrape the bottom of all the Southern Hemisphere countries. And that red bar in there, that is going to be the greatest UVB damage to the crops, which will stunt growth and reduce crop yields. So the Earth's atmosphere, just a quick 101 here as we continue. Follow the yellow line up. You know, the tropopause is kind of at the top where, you know, the clouds are, airplanes fly around there, and then we get into the ozone layer in the stratosphere. And then finally, what I'm talking about, stratopause, mesosphere is 50 to 70 kilometers up. And this is where the water vapor had reached and causing clouds that high up in the atmosphere, an enormous amount. So it all is predicated and based on these ice crystals that are now forming up. See, these have a flat layer on them. And that flat layer is a perfect petri dish for ozone to be broken down. Depletion of ozone is what you're looking at. The more of these ice crystal clouds, which are now verified through measurable science, that there's a huge, it's so far off the scale. It's not like a 6 sigma event where people, oh, black swan, 6 sigma. This is like a 200 sigma event. This is literally once in a several thousand year above what would be considered a 6 sigma event. So when we look at this, orders of magnitude is so far off the scale that it's really incomprehensible for us as a human to see how much the planet was affected by this single eruption. The scale of it is really hard to comprehend on how much extra water vapor had been put up there. So October 2021, and when you're looking at Dobson units again, you would look for destruction of ozone. If all of I'm telling you is truly happening, all these ice surfaces are breaking down ozone, it should be measurable. So for the left chart over there, I put the 2 yellow arrows so you can see the Dobson units are even turning a bit yellow around the 375 to 400-ish, circling around where the dark blues are, the heaviest loss of total ozone. And you can see the yellow is really starting, that means it's starting to backfill and grow the ozone and fill and repair the ozone damage from the chlorofluorocarbons back in the 70s. But as we march into October of 2022, what do you notice? That yellow band is completely gone, meaning catastrophic reduction of ozone in a single year. Now, if this were to continue, then the light green around there is going to turn to blue, and you're going to look at something that the scientists and me as well, the scientists are not going to be able to explain this. It's going to be such a rapid onset of almost instantaneous loss and massive biggest ozone hole ever reported and recorded, and they just won't understand why. Or maybe they won't come clean, but this is so far out there for anybody to predict this. So if my science is halfway correct, August, September, October, November of this year, 2023, one of the biggest stories on the planet will be in our fall in the Northern Hemisphere, the catastrophic ozone destruction and how the ozone hole has grown so big, and watching they're going to use global warming and some other ridiculousness to try to say humans need to be controlled even more. So it's all about the barley, basically, the crops. So I was asked by a few ag traders, can I identify which crops and which regions are going to be most heavily affected? So here we go. Any of you out of there want to take notes? Barley, what do we use it for? Predominantly animal feed. We do it for brewing. And also you can eat it. It's a human food source crop too. So it has those 3 main uses, but mainly it's over on the fodder side and on the beverage side. The human consumption side's minimal in comparison to those other 2 industries. So We're going to be looking at South Africa, Argentina, Uruguay, and Australia. What you need to do is then dive into the research publications and see if there's more UVB, because if there's not a lot of ozone up there, it's going to allow different concentrations of radiation to penetrate from space. UVB is a really heavy destructive, cancer-causing, sunburn-causing. Remember, you go to Australia, you think you're going to roast in a microwave oven, like cover yourself every square inch, cover the hat. The sunscreen's like, 600 down there SPF. Those kind of things you've always heard about Australia, that is going to increase. And as that increases, it's going to have an effect on crops as well as people. You go out there too long, your skin going to get sunburned. So it's just real simple. UVB plus is the kind of the black and white lines. That's an increase in UVB because of reduced ozone. And on the left side, you're going to see an 18% reduction in plant yield the higher the UVB goes. And also, depending on what type of plant it is and what season or what grow phase it is in, it could be as high as 34% reduction. From the planting to the mid-grow, that's the left side what you're looking at. When we finally get to the end of the harvest, depends on if this ozone depletion really starts to hit, it's sort of toward when they're getting toward the harvest and it's in the last 2 months or a month and a half of maturation in the fields, you're going to get a 22% to 29% loss of yield. So these are just the numbers that peer-reviewed coming out. And, if the numbers don't do it for you, this is the actual density of the plant difference based on UVB concentrations. And this is all, again, related to how much ozone is destroyed on the ice crystal surfaces with the bromine and chlorine catalyst. And this is what happens. The chlorine and bromine break down the ozone on the ice crystal surface in the mesosphere. And once that happens, the ozone disappears. Because it's no longer ozone, the O3 got broken down. It's no longer O3, it's broken into different molecular constituents. O3 has disappeared chemically, it turned into something else. Still a gas, but it's different. That UVB is going to start hitting much heavier. So once we see the plant density differences, you'll understand how the mechanisms are moving for crop yield losses. So this is one of my favorite ones here. You really have to dig back because recently there's been very, very, very little research. Almost all the research I got was 80s and 90s and some 1970s. The control group is on the left, meaning that they planted it in the field. They didn't do anything with it. They let it grow under natural conditions. And then on the right, you'll see the plus UVB, means increases in UVB. And they went through the different types and species of barley that we use for commercial crops. So the control group, for example, for Halcyon, 6.8 tons per hectare on the barley yield, but then if it's increased UVB, it drops down to 6.47. Okay, not such a gargantuan loss, but the Manitou variety, which is mainly grown in South America, it dropped from 8.4 tons per hectare down to 7.73 tons. All right, that's nearly a 1 ton loss per hectare. Now multiply by 100,000 or 1 million hectares, and you're looking at millions of tons loss. So you can start to do good math with the barley because that's kind of the lowest hanging fruit. Losses are going to be almost instantaneous right along with the ozone hole. So those two will run in tandem. Now, eventually these mesospheric ice crystal clouds will come out of the atmosphere and magically the ozone hole will repair itself because there'll be no more breakdown surface for it and it'll revert back to normal again. Here's something I found of interest too. Now we need to talk about the altitude of the plants. Where it is on the planet, that's okay. But we need to know like the altitude that it's growing to really get the best of forecasting out here. So 0 to 500 meters is 0 to 1,500 feet for you in the US. And 1,500 feet up to 3,000 feet is the 500 to 1,000 meter band. But you'll notice the ozone depletion of either 20% or 40% greatly affects crops either way. The sensitive, and you can see down there, a 5 to 25% crop loss, and highly sensitive would be above 25% reduction in yield. So they've already done the math. Now all you have to do is get the altitude layering, the regional crop growth zones, and then just put these variables in and plug them in. Okay, well, let's do a 10% loss. Obviously, it'd be somewhere around 26% to get 54. You can do the variables at the percentages to get the crop losses, and then you just run a couple numbers and you go best case scenario, worst case scenario. All right, traders out there, these are where you're going to expect crop losses heaviest. So let's start with South Africa. I know we're coming up to the break here, but I'll continue on to the forecasting. So those of you out there that are buyers of barley, if your crops only barley is coming from the Western Cape, you're going to need to find a new supplier and a new loading port, because the Western Cape produces 74% of all barley coming out of South Africa. As the furthest south, it's going to be affected the most. It's going to be in the heavy UVB damage zone. And also, if you see the black box above the crop calendar, it's right in the middle of the maturation in the mid-season, which you can refer back to the charts, which would reduce crop yields, a good 10 to 15%, depending on which variety that they're using down in Western Cape. You have to see exactly what the seed suppliers are running down there and figure that one out. But now you need to overlap the crop calendars with the specific zones on the location and the altitudes. So here you are. Crop traders, you're going to need to move zones out of South Africa. Now, Western Cape, you already know that's going to be a loss. They're going to lose an enormous amount. So then you just add that, what percentage that is global total. And as you swing around the Southern Hemisphere, you should get a large global total, and you could forecast out the percentage of increased runaway on the futures markets based on these losses. Now, one thing, let me come back here for a second. South Africa is already having a huge amount of crop losses anyway. Now, they're a major supplier to the rest of inter-Africa for corn. So if you think about South Africa having problems growing barley, you could also anticipate that other crop species would be affected as well. So when we look at South Africa as a major supplier to northern, less developed African nations, they in turn are going to start to lose their supplies from their main supplier in the same continent. So where do they go then, and where do they purchase it from? And it's not about even if they can find it, the price will be increased. So then that will knock on and increase the prices everybody on the street pays. And this is where the civil unrest starts. So you can daisy chain this out and forecast the civil unrest hotspots, the crop loss hotspots, which crops will be lost, which seasons, and then you start to get a really good forecast of how the world's going to move, because governments are going to try to control the citizens in these areas where the civil unrest first starts because of food price increases. And we're at record world food pricing right now. And we'll continue with this. David Dubine right here, Brighteon TV. We'll be back after the break and continue the analysis. See you then.